Mama, I called, taking my boots off and leaving my knapsack by the door. Sean came out of Mama's room, frowning and waving his hand. She's sleeping, he signed, his hand moving over his face like it was pulling his eyes closed. It's not even 4 o'clock, I signed back, saying the words at the same time. Sean could read lips, but most times I was thinking too fast to talk slow enough for him to understand me, so I just signed right back at him. She's tired, Franny. I felt something jump inside of me, something hard and heavy. Don't start your worrying, Sean said. She's just feeling tired. 3 years ago, Mama started complaining about her belly hurting. It took a long time for everybody to convince her to go to the doctor. She was still shaken from losing baby Lila and the miscarriage she'd had a year after that, so hospitals and doctors made her nervous. They always find something wrong, she said, drinking mint tea to calm the pain. But the pain didn't get calm, and a few weeks later, she went to the emergency room. That night, we found out that she'd had a baby growing, but the baby wasn't thriving. That's the word the doctor used, thriving. And the next year, when my fourth grade teacher said to Mama, Franny isn't thriving in science and math, my Mama's face had clouded over and tears came to her eyes. Mama stayed in the hospital for a long time after the not thriving baby died. And the whole time she was in there, it felt like our family was holding its breath. Then, when the doctors said she was okay, we all started to breathe again. But Mama came home quiet and sad, and for a long time, that's how she stayed. But the weeks passed and Mama got better. Every morning she'd get out of bed and hug me and Sean, telling us her gifts, calling us her gifts from God, her unbroken promises, her little lives. And some mornings I'd find her sitting holding the framed picture of Lila she kept at her bedside, a sadness on her face so deep it seemed like no one would ever be able to break through it. The years passed and the sadness went away too. Mama laughed more and hugged us all the time. She and Daddy headed back to their church, and slowly our house became this new kind of normal. She's supposed to be all better, I signed, slinking down against the wall. I felt like I was 8 years old again, scared and mad at Mama for not being Mama. She had said she was all better. Sean smiled and shook his head. It wasn't a big smile, just more like a big brother smile. He's so beautiful, all tall and dark with pretty eyes and a nice big brother smile. If he wasn't deaf, he'd have a million girlfriends. Hearing girls were always looking at him, but most times when they saw his hands flying through the air, they stopped looking, which was silly to me. Sign language is just another language, and if they weren't so silly, maybe they could learn to speak it. Once in a while, he'd tell us about a deaf girl in his school that liked him. Sometimes he liked her back. Sometimes he didn't. She is all better, Sean signed. Just relax. Help me make some dinner. I don't want to make dinner, I signed. I want to kiss Mama's head. Then go kiss it already. I tiptoed down the hall and stopped to look at the picture of Lila. Her dark eyes stared back at me. Sometimes Mama talked about the baby heaven, where Lila and the two other babies had gone, how maybe there was a whole other Wright Barnes family up there, fussing and laughing, eating and singing. I stood there staring at the picture. If Jesus came back to this world, I don't know what I'd want from him. I know what I'd ask, though. I'd say, Mr. Jesus, I'm sorry to bother you, but I have a question. I wanted to know, how do you have hope? I'd want to know, how do you have hope when there's always a Trevor somewhere kicking at somebody, when there's always a Mama somewhere who maybe wasn't thriving, and maybe he would look at me and smile the way Sean smiled, all patient and sorry for me. Maybe he'd have that calm look like the Jesus boy. Maybe he'd have an answer. I opened Mama's door slowly and kneeled down beside her bed. It was almost dark now, and the light coming into her room was silvery and soft. Everything was so quiet. I could hear my own breath and hers too, coming slowly. Her mouth was slightly open, and she looked real peaceful with her eyes closed and that little bit of silver light coming in on her dark face. She had the most perfect nose, not too big and not too small. I ran my finger over her eyebrows. They were thick, and then they got thin at the edges because she tweezes them that way. One day, I'd get my eyebrows tweezed, even if it hurt, just so they could be perfect like Mama's. And maybe I'd get some false eyelashes so mine could be long and dark and beautiful like hers. I sat on her bed, pushed her hair away from her forehead, and kissed it. Mama opened her eyes. "Stop worrying," she whispered. "I see you setting your mind to worrying already. I'm just tired, that's all." Mama looked like she wanted to say something more, but then didn't. She closed her eyes again. After a few minutes had passed, she opened them, looked at me, and smiled. "Franny, everything's going to be fine. I'm fine." "Then why are you sleeping in the daytime?" I moved a little bit closer to her. Her body felt warm. "Because your mama gets tired sometimes, dealing with all you kids. It's just me and Sean. We're not that much work." "Already feels like more most days." "What do you mean, it already feels like more?" Mama touched me on the cheek. "I don't want you worrying, Franny. That's all I'm saying, okay?" I nodded. "Wait until you have two. Then you can come talk to me about who's a lot and who's not a lot." Mama smiled. I tried to move closer. "Why don't you just sit on top of me, girl?" she said, moving over on the bed. "I want you to get up now," I said. I knew I sounded whiny, but I didn't care. Mama sighed. "I can't, Franny. Not right now. In a little while, okay? I promise you." She looked at me. My face must have been all worried looking because she said, "What's that old Maribel Tanks talking about these days?" Samantha sat down right at her table, and then I had to sit there because Samantha was sitting there, and then Maribel was talking about sticky pennies that the Jesus boy... Mama closed her eyes. "The who?" she said softly. "The new boy. Everybody is saying he looks like Jesus, only I don't think so because he's just a kid and all, just that his hair is all..." I could hear Mama breathing slowly, and maybe she was already asleep. "Mama?" "Yes, baby?" What's surreal?" "Your voice going when I'm almost asleep." "No, it isn't. I mean, is that what it means?" "Like a dream," Mama said softly. "Like something not feeling like it could be really happening. Does that make sense, sweetie?" I nodded. "Yeah, like that boy just showing up. Like he was showing up in somebody's dream, and then you wake up and maybe he's not there anymore. Or maybe he is, but it's not as strange. People always wonder about the new kid, you know that. You were the new kid once." "Only by a month, and that was because of the silly chicken pox." "But everybody looked at you like you were from the moon. At least that's how you described it." I tried to move closer to Mama some more. "Well, they did stare." "Of course they did, Boo," Mama said. "We told you again and again not to scratch, and you scratched anyway. So you had scabs all over your body. I was stared too. Thank God for vitamin E." "It didn't clear them all up," I said, holding out my arm. "I still have the 2 pockmarks on my hands and some on your legs. I know, baby. Maybe your daughter will listen to you when you tell her not to scratch. Go help Sean get dinner going. I'm just going to rest a few minutes, then I'll get up." I kissed her forehead but didn't move. "Your mama sure is tired this evening." She didn't finish. After a while, her breath started coming all even, and I knew she was asleep. "It's all so surreal," I whispered, stroking her forehead. Outside, the sky was getting darker. "Some days, it feels like it's always going to be winter time." Mama reached up and pressed her hand on top of mine. We stayed like that for a long time.